Was Jesus based on the Greek god Asclepius? Many mysticists say the story of Jesus borrows elements from the Greek god of medicine, Asclepius. The claim is that Asclepius was also a dying and rising god, that he healed people in similar ways that Jesus did, and rose others from the dead. But in reality, this is nothing more than a hasty generalization. First, just about all deities healed people, so being a healer is far too vague to create a connection. Second, during his lifetime as a human, before he was made into a god, Asclepius didn't heal miraculously, or with the power of gods, but naturally or medically, with special plants and herbs. Third, Robert Carl Nuss notes specified healing accounts of Asclepius do not come from the biographies about his life, but after he was turned into a god of medicine. These were temple inscriptions, and are just reports of people who came to the temple for help and received some type of healing through a mystical way. So unlike Jesus, these healing accounts did not come from the biography of the life of Asclepius, and plus, there are quite a lot of these. Jesus mysticists have simply gone through and cherry-picked a few that could be similar to the healings that Jesus did. When you have numerous healings, there is bound to be some overlap. Next, it is true Asclepius did raise people from the dead during his lifetime, but this was not a miraculous power. He was just lucky to come across a special plant that could do this. According to the legend, Asclepius was in prison, and a snake slithered its way in. He managed to kill it, but then saw a second snake enter and heal the first snake with a special herb. Asclepius then used this herb to bring people back to life, and Zeus killed him to prevent him from resuscitating the dead. So the devil is in the details. Anyone could have done what Asclepius did, they just had to find the herb he used. There was nothing special about him, like it is with Jesus in the Gospels. So the details are different enough, one cannot say there is a parallel, without stretching the legend beyond its limits. Also, the moral of the story of Asclepius was there is no coming back from the dead, and that humans are meant to die in the grave. The story of the Gospel is the exact opposite. Humans are meant to live forever, and Jesus came to make that our reality. The underlying message of Jesus and the story of Asclepius are actually opposites. Finally, what about the alleged resurrection of Asclepius? Well, no, and no account ever claims he was resurrected, or uses the Greek term for that. The earliest accounts only report that Zeus killed him for resuscitating people, but report nothing after that. Later accounts state he was brought up to the stars to live as the god of medicine, but no account says this was done by a physical resurrection where his body went missing. Richard Carrier claims that Ovid said Asclepius was resurrected. Ovid thus remarks that Zeus did for his son's sake that which he forbade be done. In other words, Zeus forbade raising the dead and made an exception for Asclepius. It is thus understood that Zeus rose Asclepius from the dead. He had been a corpse, so he would have remained, but by a miracle of God, now he was alive, eternal and immortal, supernaturally powerful, just like Jesus. The problem is, this is reading way too much into one vague line in Ovid's writings. Ovid doesn't say physical resurrection happened, and even spells out just prior to this what he meant when he said Zeus brought him back to life. The youth, Asclepius, blasted by ancestral bolts of Zeus, soars from earth, rising as the constellation Ophiuchus, and flings his hands coiled with double snakes. Asclepius was made into a star. Another translation of the passage Carrier cites says, Zeus feared the precedent and aimed his thunderbolt at the man who employed excessive art. Phoebus, you whined. He is a god. Smile at your father, who for your sake undoes his prohibitions when he obtained immortality for Asclepius. This reading correlates with what other accounts said happened in the legend. For example, a later text says that Asclepius was put among the stars. Scholars also agree with this interpretation. Emma and Ludwig Edelston said, Eratosthenes asserts that Asclepius, the son of Apollo and Coronis, he whom Zeus killed with his thunderbolt, eventually became a star. Sabine G. Oswald said, As for Asclepius, it is said that he was made immortal, and Apollo set his image among the stars as Serpentarius, the snake-bearer. Theonicondus said, Ophiuchus is said to be Asclepius, whom Zeus placed among the stars to oblige Apollo. So given that one sentence of Ovid can be translated in different ways, and just before this, it says he rose from the earth to be among the stars, scholars and other sources say Asclepius was immortalized in the stars, not resurrected. It is most likely a stretch of the imagination to say Ovid was talking about a physical resurrection, like what Paul and the Gospel authors claimed happened to Jesus. The surrounding evidence suggests all that happened was an immortalization in the stars, not a resurrection. So there is simply not enough evidence to assert a resurrection happened, like with what happened to Jesus. Last, some mysticists will cite Celsus, who said, a great multitude, both of Greeks and barbarians, acknowledge that they have frequently seen, and still see, no mere phantom, but Asclepius himself, healing and doing good, foretelling the future. So Celsus seems to imply, some still see Asclepius as a physical being. However, this can be addressed by quoting how Origen responded to Celsus. He cannot demonstrate that an incalculable number, as he asserts, of Greeks and barbarians acknowledge the existence of Asclepius, while we, if we deem this a matter of importance, can clearly show a countless multitude of Greeks and barbarians who acknowledge the existence of Jesus. Celsus doesn't give any sources to go on and just asserts this claim secondhand. We don't have any independent sources that actually report this outside of Celsus. He was specifically trying to build a case against Christianity. In his apologetic attempts, he probably just over-exaggerated this point, given no sources can corroborate this claim. So given what scholars and our earliest sources say, there is just not enough evidence to assert Asclepius rose from the dead. Thus, there is no evidence Jesus was just a myth based on Asclepius.